painting is also associated with Zen Buddhism. In fact, some of the most influential painters were actually priest painters. They were Zen monks. They would create their pieces after meditating, and they would create them for the purposes of meditation. These paintings tended to be pretty simple and monochromatic, with the idea of stimulating the mind, not the senses. The most famous of these artists is Seishu, and there is a copy of his self-portrait on the left. He was a master of ink painting, and he was also a Zen Buddhist priest. The painting that O'Reilly gives us, the hanging scroll, is figure 519 in our textbook, and it is referred to as a splashed ink landscape. This is a piece that Seishu would have meditated upon before actually creating it. He would have come to have a sense of oneness with his subject, and then very, very quickly, rapidly with his paintbrush, put down the strokes, creating suggested form. He is a painter who was heavily influenced by Chinese sources. He actually traveled to China to study. Okay. I've inserted a slide from the web that'll give you a kind of rundown on Seishu that might be useful along the way. It does tell us that he's a Zen monk. It also tells us he does splashed ink pictures and with loaded brush and ink, applied primarily very quickly with rapid strokes, sometimes with accident. That becomes an important part of splash ink paintings. Dripping on the surface of the paper was an important part of the creation. The result, our PowerPoint slide suggests, is a move towards abstraction, where it's very, very difficult to tell exactly what is depicted and to be able to, in this case, pick out all of the forms. We'll take a look at a detail to see this. It is this quality of suggestion that makes Seishu such an important contributor. Okay, this is, excuse me, the full scroll with a detail, again, of the image that he painted. It is created with a variety of contrasting light to dark areas of the brush. He creates suggested form. He leaves empty space on the composition in order to suggest depth. It is asymmetrical, and the images that he captures appear to be rugged, appear to be worn, and convey the sense of time. The human presence here is very tiny. It's only suggested, and what we're looking at is clearly not a real place. It is a place from Seishu's imagination, conjured after a meditation. The brushwork does suggest calligraphy, and it does record our effort to become one with nature in a flash of, let's call it, enlightenment. When he was through working, after his initial meditation and speedy execution, he added an inscription that reads this, quote, "My eyes are misty and my spirit exhausted," suggesting that he has poured out all of his efforts and all of his feelings into this particular picture. Okay, it was created for the purpose of meditation, and it is also an image that was intended to suggest that we could, by viewing the painting, come to understand our place, our role, perhaps in the natural order. Okay. This is a set of details from the splashing painting. I'd like you to look at the left, and in the left detail in particular, if you come down to the lower right-hand corner, you're going to see two tiny little suggested figures. Those are representations of two fishermen in a boat in the water. Everything is suggested. You, the viewer, will have to do the reading, but you, the viewer, also are encouraged to meditate on this and perhaps the meaning of this as well. These are two more paintings by Seishu. I put them in here to let you know what his range was. He could work in a number of styles, and he did study a number of masters in China, including Ma Yuan. He actually traveled to China with an enthusiastic, open-minded approach, learning about Chinese painting as much as he possibly could. These represent two of the four seasons, winter on the left, autumn on the right. They're broken down into foreground, middle ground, and distance. And both of them suggest, again, that the brushwork is based upon calligraphy, that Seishu learned first to write before he learned to be an artist. There is also, with the seasons, the sense of passage of time, and also perhaps melancholy that is traditionally associated with Japanese aesthetics. I did want to show you these. These are tsubas, and they were used by warriors. They were guards on the sword to protect your hand from slipping. You can see that on the lower left. So these would have been the decorations on the tsuba of a samurai warrior. Always the image facing the warrior or the swordsman. These images are very Zen. They are drawn from nature. They're simplified, they're asymmetrical, and they're also images that may indeed cause the warrior to contemplate and to find a deeper meaning in them. If you take a look again at the one on the left and the bottom, that is actually a very stylized crane that sweeps around with its wings, creating the enclosed space for the tsuba or for the guard of the sword. Okay. Also associated with Zen, and in particular very important to Zen, is the art of tea and the tea ceremony. In the feudal period, the tea ceremony became incredibly popular, and the reason for that is it would bring calm to warlords and to leaders engaged in warring activities. Now, it's not the caffeine in the tea that's bringing calm. It is actually the lengthy tea ceremony that takes place that allows the warlord to contemplate and also to engage in meditation and relaxation. What we're looking at here is the tea house at the Golden Pavilion, but you can find tea houses in most castles and palaces and retreats. Everybody of economic means was someone who would possess a tea house. These tea houses reflect Shinto-based values, which you will find in Mr. O'Reilly's textbook, and I've doctored them just a little bit. They are wabi-sabi values and aesthetics. Associated with wabi would be humility, honesty, and simplicity. We're going to particularly see the humility when we get to the crawl door of this structure. In sabi, we have a love of what is rustic and simple. We have a love also of stillness, and that's part of the tea ceremony itself. And then we have a beauty that is found in things that are old, that are used, that might have a patina, or that might actually convey imperfections. All of this suggests the passage of time and transience. With sabi, there is a touch perhaps of sadness or of melancholy that is associated with it. This is, excuse me, this is 525. Senno Rikiyu, who is one of the very famous, most famous tea masters. He was a tea master to a warlord, and we believe that this is his tea house. It's attributed, so we aren't certain, but we tend to like to think that it is. It too represents these very Shinto-related values. The tea ceremony, and then this is our tea ceremony leader located on the right, the great tea master, who is a tea master to a warlord. The tea ceremony itself could take up to 4 hours, so we're talking about a very protracted, as O'Reilly calls it, performance. He describes it as a kind of performance art. There often were long periods of silence with little conversation. You would enter, and let's take another look here. This is a diagram of the famous tea house that O'Reilly is giving us. And what we're looking at here is the crawl door. You would come, first of all, you would cleanse yourself, you would purify yourself using water, and then you would come along a stone pathway, a very irregular one, and then you would enter the door, which is low, and it is called a crawl door. By doing this, you would be expressing your own humility. As you go into the room, you would seat with the other guests, usually I'd say maybe 4, something like that, a small group of intimates, and you would be able to contemplate an object that would be placed in the alcove. We're looking straight into the alcove opposite the crawl door. This object could be anything. It could be a painting, it could be a flower, it could be a piece of driftwood, it could be a stone, or it could actually be an object that was a ceramic. Anything that would be worthy of contemplation and also of aesthetic discussion. Okay. Among the many objects that were considered also, and these are 2 more views of that tea house, would be some of the tea wares that themselves became works of art. Okay, this is the one that O'Reilly gives us. It is figure 526 in our textbook, and it is a raku tea bowl. These are also unique, that the famous ones actually get names or titles. And this particular one is named Mount Fuji. It references the virtues, the love of the rustic, of things that are old, that are worn, basically sabi. Also, there's an element of wabi, the humility, and the honesty with which we're treating the materials. This bowl is large enough to be held with 2 hands. It is appreciated for the imperfection of its shape and the quality of accident that's a part of its creation. It is raku. It would have been hand-shaped, not thrown. A thrown piece would have had more regular outlines. It was also fired at very low temperatures, which creates a porous exterior, allowing for imperfections, perhaps also for spontaneous qualities and for accidents that occur in the lead glaze. The vessel is also taken out of the kiln hot and allowed to cool in the open air. These tea bowls, then, a part of the tea ceremony, reflect many of the virtues that are associated with wabi and wasabi, and the values that are also linked with Zen.